I am up early and on my way to the boat that'll take me out to Dry Tortugas National Park. Walking through Key West, I love how all the roosters are crowing, telling people, wake up, have a great day. So I'm getting close.
No matter how many times I go through the Sally Port, I'm always impressed with the size of this place. Somehow it seems bigger on the inside. You got it. Somebody knows my references. It's a six-sided fort. From out there you can only see two sides at the most. In here you can see all six sides and all six corners. There's about 8 acres just in this parade ground field in the middle of it. This fort is absolutely massive, but it's actually the third largest of its era. There's two that are bigger. Both of those forts incorporate natural terrain and earthworks into the design of their fortification. This is 360 degrees of construction. These walls are 45 feet tall. The front part of them, solid masonry, 8 foot thick. This thing is an absolute behemoth. And try to imagine what this island would look like if it wasn't here. There's not much going on. You got a bunch of sand and coral, some grass, some scrubby little buttonwood trees. There's not much out here. There's definitely nothing to build a fort with. See? It's obviously bricks. Bricks are made of sand and clay. You've got to go pretty far north to find any viable clay beds to manufacture this many bricks. Most of the lower tier bricks, the tan colored ones in the first 2 stories, they're from up around Pensacola, Florida. They were made by hand, loaded onto little wooden sailboats and shipped down here, offloaded and assembled by hand. And those upper tier ones, those more red colored, those aren't modern bricks, those are northern bricks. Those are from Brewer, Maine. Shipped the same way. Little wooden sailboats brought them all the way down here. Everything had to be brought down here. All the mortar, barrels and barrels of mortar to glue them together. All the concrete went into the foundation. All the lumber that they used to form the arches when they were doing construction. We walked through the Sally Port. Those big gray blocks, that's granite that was quarried and carved in Vermont. The stone floors that we walked across, they go all the way around the first tier. Thick, 5-inch thick slabs of a stone, similar to slate. Very dense, very strong, very cool name. It's called Greywacky. Those were all brought here from New Hampshire. All of these stones, all the bricks, everything was brought here. We've got shipping orders for the materials that went in this. We have got receipts. We purchased about 16 million bricks to build this fort. Wow. Now, we do know that some of those ships sank in the process of bringing the bricks here. We lost a couple of loads. So we don't have an exact number. I've been working on it. I've counted 531 of these bricks so far. I'm gonna get there. I'll let you know. Solid answer. But there's a heck of a lot of them. 16 million, we'll just stick with that. We're 300 miles from Mexico, or 100 miles north of Cuba, 70 miles away from Key West. There is absolutely nothing around us. And it begs the question, what in the world were they thinking? Why would they go through that much effort to build Fort Jefferson right here? Now, if we're going to understand that, we got to go back in time a little bit. We'll start in the 1500s. Back in 1513, my man, Don Juan Ponce de Leon, was out sailing. He was cruising around, he was having an adventure, he was looking for the fountain of youth. And he ended up sailing past these islands. He noticed some pretty darn important things about them. The first thing that Ponce de Leon saw out on these islands got his attention. He went sailing past Loggerhead and he looked at the beaches. There was about 160 sea turtles on the beaches of Loggerhead Key when he went by. And that was important for Ponce de Leon. See, he's an ocean crossing sailor in a little wooden sailboat. They didn't have Kim in the galley with fridges full of Jersey Mike sandwiches back then. If you had anything fresh on your boat, by the time you made it over here, it was gone or it was rotten. You're down to salt pork and nasty biscuits. You are hungry. Those sea turtles were the answer. That's fresh food. That was so important to Ponce de Leon that when he was charting these islands, he didn't discover them, he just did the first detailed charts. When he was charting these islands, he wrote a note right on them. He wrote Las Tortugas. That's Spanish, it means turtles. Wrote a little note there. Now he wasn't naming these islands Las Tortugas, he was writing a note for other sailors. So they knew that there was turtles here. Basically he wrote right on the map, snacks. There's food here. You can get some fresh food. So a lot of the countries from Europe, the big superpower countries of Europe, are coming over to the Americas for the purpose of colonizing, and basically all of them are ending up going right past the Dry Tortugas on their way back towards Europe. Got a lot of ocean crossing sailors here, and because of the source of food and the freshwater anchorage and the proximity to the Gulf Stream, that current they're all in, that makes these islands super important for those sailors back in the day. They don't become important to America for a couple hundred years, not until the early 1800s. France was having trouble with its colonies. They had sort of overextended, a little too much property. They had to liquidate some land. So we ended up meeting with France in 1801. We formed the secret treaty of San Ildefonte, which basically suggested that we were going to put in a bid on some of their property to try to expand our territory. We finalized that agreement in 1803, gave France $11.5 million, and we made the Louisiana Purchase. When we did that, we basically doubled the size of our country. At that time, we were pretty much just developed up and down the East Coast and up around the Great Lakes. Florida wasn't even part of America at that time. Florida was still Spanish territory, including all the Florida Keys. So what ended up happening is when we acquired the Louisiana Purchase, we have all this new land full of new resources to help drive our industry. And that was the main goal for America at that time. We were trying to grow and develop our industry and our economy, develop our nation, and catch up to the rest of the bigger, more established countries. Pretty much every country in Europe was hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years older than America. We were brand new, and we were trying really hard to grow up and get developed. So the Louisiana Purchase was going to be able to drive that process faster and faster. The faster we could develop, the better. And all those new resources were going to be the fuel to get that going. The only problem was we didn't have roads leading from the East Coast to the new heartland of America that we had just acquired. No roads, no trains, no highways. So you had two options. You walk across the middle of the country, or you sail a boat down and around. And that was actually much safer, much faster, and much more economical to sail down around the tip of Florida and towards the Gulf to get access to that Louisiana Purchase. The problem was you can't just sail right around Florida and head north into the Gulf. There's the third largest barrier reef in the entire world. We motored through it today. It connects all the way from Miami to here at the Dry Tortugas. It ends here. If you are trying to sail up into the Gulf from the East Coast, you've got to go down to the bottom of Florida, all the way west to the Dry Tortugas, and then it's safe to turn north. This whole barrier reef is the whole Florida Keys. Very shallow, very rocky. It will absolutely wreck your boat. So when we did end up acquiring Florida and these islands from Spain in the early 1820s, we started our very first project here in the Dry Tortugas. The very first thing we built no longer stands, but its foundation is that little white spot on the ground just behind that buttonwood tree. It sort of just looks like the place where I stand way too much, but it's actually a stone foundation. They built a lighthouse there. That lighthouse marked the safe harbor to anchor up in, and the point where it was safe to finally head around the end of this barrier reef system. On the way here, we weren't in the Atlantic, we weren't in the Gulf. The Straits of Florida is the body of water south of us between here and Cuba. We were basically just in the reef system on our way here. And we've got channels and much better charts to be able to do that now. They couldn't do that reliably back then. So we start sailing past the Dry Tortugas constantly in the effort of driving our nation's development. All of our shipping lanes, our most important shipping lanes, are going right past these islands to connect the heartland of America and the East Coast. And this is a very strategic little pinch point. See, the Straits of Florida, it's just like the Straits of Gibraltar. The Straits of Gibraltar, that's your entrance to the Mediterranean Sea. If you control Gibraltar, you control the whole Med. It's the same here. Straits of Florida is the entrance to the Gulf. It's your way into the Gulf of Mexico. and we're 100 miles north of Cuba. It would take like 15 or 20 boats to fully blockade the Straits of Florida. If that happened, it would shut down all of our shipping lanes and grind the development of our nation to a halt. We couldn't allow that to happen. We knew we needed to protect our development, we needed to protect our growth as a country, and we figured out a way to do that because of the War of 1812. And we were at war with the British in 1812. In 1814, they ended up sailing on the coast of Maryland, and they had big, well-developed navies. We didn't, so we couldn't stop them. They marched across the state to Washington, D.C. They had big standing armies. We had militia. We couldn't stop them. They took the city, they burnt it down. There's nothing we could do about it. Just north of there in Baltimore, they tried as well, and they failed. Baltimore was a fortified city, and it was able to repel the attack because of that fortification. That taught us that without having a giant army in place, fortifications were going to be how we protect our borders. So the idea we ended up calling the third system of fortifications, coastal fortifications, 42 in total, that went all the way up and down the entire east coast of the country. They were all interconnected with roads and canals, so if any one of them got attacked, the ones on either side could come and re-support. And the way that these forts worked, what made them so functional and so successful, is that they required minimal manpower. Armies are very expensive. You've got to hire the people, house the people, feed the people, train the people, and then even if they're not fighting, you still have to continue to pay your army. Well, at that time, we could build giant fortifications like this for very little money. The reason why was kind of unfortunate. We were using slave labor to do it, but it allowed us to build these giant third system fortifications up and down the East Coast to protect our borders. Then they could be minimally staffed. They could either be left empty when they weren't needed, or they could have just a couple troops in them. If that fort got attacked, those troops would be safe. They could await reinforcements from either side, or have time to allow for militia to be raised in the rear to help protect them. This system worked really, really great up and down the East Coast. The only problem is we're all the way down here in the middle of nothing out in the water. There's no fort on either side to come and reinforce Fort Jefferson. Fort Jefferson had to stand alone, and it had the most important job in all of America: protect our ability to grow and develop as a nation. So Fort Jefferson had to be built different than a lot of those third system forts. Fort Jefferson had to be built absolutely massively. That's why it's 45 feet tall, 16 million bricks thick. Was designed to have 420 cannons in it for 360-degree crossfire defense. This fort meant business, and like I said, it had the most important job out of all the forts. It had to drive and protect our ability to grow and develop. And look at us now. It worked. America ended up becoming a pretty darn cool place, and Fort Jefferson protected our ability to do that. So that's why this massive fort got built in the middle of nowhere on a tiny little island. It's a very, very strategic location to the development of America, and America owes its development to Fort Jefferson. So there's your 20-minute introduction to the fort. I appreciate you all paying attention.
So everyone on the beach is seeing it. There's a 5-foot shark that just swam in front of me. I didn't even see it. Oh, everyone on the beach is excited about it. Well, I am glad I made the trip out here. Expensive and all-day commitment. But it's pretty dang neat. A lot of history. And the fact it was built and never had to be used in war is pretty cool.